Hey guys, I know it's been a minute since my last video, but I've kind of been sick. I had a bad flu. I'm over it. Mostly you can kind of still see some of it in my face, but it's mostly gone. And so I wanted to make this video though because this is a story that I've been wanting to say for quite some time. I just couldn't think of a layout for it. And so thinking about how next month is Gay Pride Month, I kind of found a connection to tell the story, and so I'll call it the possible missed opportunities for being in the closet. And this is in no way trying to coerce or convince or urge anyone to come out the closet. Do it whenever you want to. It's your time. This is just a story about a possible great thing that I lost because I was in the closet. Okay, so this story takes place in boot camp, and in the barracks you have a bunk, and the bunk across from me, there's this guy there. His name is Chris. He ended up being one of my best friends, but immediately we connected. I can't even explain how, because in this big room with all these guys, it could have been with anyone, but for some reason, me and him just clicked. He was from Colorado, super cute guy, and we were both in the choir together, and I was a tenor too, he was a baritone, so we stood right by each other, and so every day, all day, we pretty much were next to each other, and again, we connected. And he was a great guy, and I have to admit that at that time I was just so confused. I was in the military during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and so the feelings that I had for him, I thought I have to suppress them, obviously. So that's what I did. Even after boot camp, we ended up going to the same, we went to school afterwards. We were in the same barracks for that school, and you have more free time, so even after, when we were able to go out of town, we hung out together all the time, and it was great. After school, I got orders to Jacksonville, Florida, and he got orders, I believe it was to Japan. So we said our goodbyes. I go to Jacksonville. And I mentioned this in one of my other videos about suicide, but while I was in Jacksonville, it was a pretty dark time. I did try to take my life, and luckily that was unsuccessful. But afterwards, obviously, I'm still just a mess. And one day, I'm walking to the store on base, and I see Chris. And it turns out that his orders to Japan, something had happened, something fell through, and so he was given new orders to Jacksonville. So we were once again together, and it was great. We hung out all the time. I just never felt that anyone understood me until him. I could tell him anything, and so he was the first person that I felt comfortable enough to say to tell I was gay. And of course he's like, okay, that's cool. I kind of, figured that he would be okay with it, but he was, and so we kept hanging out. It was great. So this is where things kind of take a turn. Fast forward a bit, and I make another friend at work who's gay. So me and him start spending time together, and I'm still hanging out with Chris, of course. He's still my best friend at this point. But Chris starts hanging out with his roommate and just other people. So one day he tells me, he goes, "Hey, they're kicking me out of the military." And I'm like, "What? Why?" So he tells me how while his roommate was on vacation, he took his car keys and took his car to Walmart, and the car ran out of gas, and he didn't have money for gas, so he just kind of left it there. And also that he was being accused of stealing money from work, which he did. So I didn't know this dude. I'm like, what? I really flabbergasted, because this was not the Chris that I knew. So he's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. He's like, I don't want to go back home and be disappointment to my family, but I don't know what to do. And I said, why don't you just stay in my barracks room, which is a big no-no. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but I told him that, and he moved into my barracks room. I didn't have any roommates, so it was just me in this room with 2 beds, and so he moved in. And again, not a good move, but so we ended up going to the gay club maybe once or twice, you know, and after that, he was going often. And so finally I was like, what's going on? And so he tells me that he is meeting people to make money. And so I'm like, oh, so you're like gay for pay? And he's like, no, not really. He goes, actually, I'm probably bi. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. And we're just talking about that, and he ends up saying to me, he goes, you were it for me in boot camp. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, I had the biggest crush on you, and I used to watch you taking a shower. And I'm like, what? Like, this is just totally blowing my mind. I'm like, I just couldn't believe that he was saying this to me. And he's like, I'm sorry, I don't, I'm like, no. I said, it's weird, I kind of felt the same way about you. And so we had that conversation. Anyway, so my new friend, upon finding out that Chris was in the barracks room with me, kind of like, Mike, you have to tell him he has to leave. If they find him in your room, you're going to get kicked out as well. And he was absolutely right, even though I did not want to hear it. Because, I don't know, I just guess with everything that was going on, the suicide attempt and finding out, and him being back in my life, and then finding out that he had feelings for me, it was the worst thing for me to do. But again, I knew deep down inside that he was right. So I told him, you gotta go. And he understood. He was totally cool. He ended up getting his dad to send him money and bought a plane ticket, and he went back to Colorado. And once he got to Colorado, life goes on. People don't stay as connected as they should, but I tried to, and it's like his life just took a turn for the worst, and he got into drugs, and he was like super goth and just down and depressed all the time, and he ended up taking his life. And that was super hard for me when I found out, because as you can imagine, I had all these thoughts going through my head, like, I don't want to make this a long video, but really what I was thinking was, can you imagine if either one of us had been upfront with each other and how we felt about each other? Because again, it was undeniable. What could have happened? I felt like he came back into my life in Jacksonville when I needed him the most. And when you're young, you can't help but think he needed me the most, and I turned him away. I know that I did the right thing, so I don't think that anymore. But who knows where either one of us would have been had we been open about our feelings for each other. What different lives could we have had, you know? Was part of his self-destruction afterwards, was part of that because he was still missing that, you know? I'll never know. I'll never know. And so I can think of 1,000 reasons why it's not my fault, and I know it's not. So that's not the issue, but I still think, man, if I had been open with him, if he'd been open with me, how could we have helped each other even more than we were? Because I know that I supported him, and I know that on some level I must have kept him above water, you know, because me not being around him changed him as well. So I just wanted to tell the story because, again, I've been wanting to tell it for some time, and he's been on my mind, and this is the anniversary of his passing. So I wanted to do the story in his honor because he was a great guy, and I'm not saying that, again, not saying to any of you, you should come out or something bad's gonna happen. Just, this was one of my experiences, and I wish that I had been there more for him, and maybe me being more self-assured, being more stronger, and coming out earlier, that might have changed him. It might have changed me. Who knows, right?